Hello, I'm Lucy Jennings, and I'm going to show you how to weave with the tiny loom. Now when you get your loom, you'll see that the threads are already on it, and if you look on the back, you can see how I've tied them in the middle back here. Now I'll be showing you in another video how to put the warp threads on. It's really easy, but I just wanted it to be all ready to go for you. This toothpick here, it's here because I like to have it something that can lift up the threads just a little bit. It makes it easy to weave. So let's get started. This is what we call the weft thread, the thread that we'll be weaving back and forth. The weaving terms are, the warp thread is the thread that goes up and down, and the weft thread is a thread that goes back and forth. Now sometimes with weavings, people like to have the warp threads and the weft threads show up just the same. But the kind of weaving I'm going to be showing you today is making the weft threads cover up the warp threads. That's what they do in tapestry. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to thread the needle and get started. Now, when I weave, I start by making the needle go over a thread, then under a thread, over, under, all the way across. It's so fun to learn to weave on such a tiny loom. Yes, it is a little tiny. And that makes it fun and easy because you get the project done pretty quickly. I'm just spacing out this warp thread a little bit here. Now what I'm going to do is pull it across until there's about a couple of inches hanging down. And I'm going to take the weft thread all the way down, and then I'm just going to pack it with my fingers. I guess you could use a fork or something, but for this little loom, I think your fingers just work fine. Now the whole idea here is you don't want to pull the weft thread too tight. You want them to lay inside and in between the weft thread so that it will eventually cover it up. Now I've gone over to the right side and I'm going to return now. Now if you'll see here, when I went over to the right side, the last thread, I went over it. I went over the last warp thread. So now I'm going to go under it on the return. And as you weave, your eye will learn how to see that you're skipping over a couple of threads instead of just one. I'm packing it down. Now, when you pack, you can do it the way I do. My favorite way, anyway, is to just keep it at an angle and pack it in as you go. Another way people like to do it is they make it look kind of like a hill. Like that, and then they kind of pack it in the middle and then on each side. Either way is a good way. Everybody has their favorites. Now the next thing I want to show you is to be very careful when you're pulling the thread through to the other side, because it's very easy to pull on the threads like I just did. You don't want that to happen, because what will happen if it keeps pulling in, it's going to get really skinny at the top. This is something that happens to beginners just about all the time, and it still happens to me sometimes. Well, more than sometimes even. And one of the jokes I have is when that happens, I just have to take it back out, and weavers, at least me, I almost take out as much as I weave in. So don't feel bad if you have to do that too. So just be careful when you're pulling it across that you don't pull too tight. Now, you might see that I even leave kind of a loop on each end, because it's better to have a loops going on, just a tiny bit of one, than to have it pulling in. I'm going to return again. Now see, when I get to this point, I'm very, very careful that I'm not pulling on it too tight. And it's even a good idea to pack it down with your needle and just make the little first part of it packed in, and then make sure it's all nice and even, because that's what makes a really pretty weaving, is when the edges are all nice and straight. Now that I think that looks pretty good, I'm just going to go ahead and pack the rest of it in. Now, it's okay if you let the warp threads show, but I kind of like it when they're all covered up for this kind of a weaving. It's all up to you. It's your weaving. The only thing that really isn't up to you is I don't think anybody wants to have edges going in, so always be careful. And you'll get a little better at it and faster at it. Sometimes they won't be perfect, so just don't worry about it. Now, if you can see here, the threads are starting to pack up and cover up those warp threads. I'll do a couple of more rows of green. The kits aren't all the same. The yarns are a little bit different, and to tell the truth, all of the yarns that you have are from projects I've used before, or maybe they're projects I plan to use. So I just like to go around my studio and see what kind of yarns I think would look pretty together for somebody to make a weaving with. I think for this one I'm going to just try this kind of a tape kind of yarn. What I'm going to do is I notice here on the end that I'm going to start on, it went over last time, so I'm going to go under. Now you might be wondering, does it matter which side I start on? Not really. Once again, I'm leaving just a couple of inches of a tail, and I'll be showing you what to do with them later on, when we're all finished with the weaving. Oops, I made a mistake. Do you see what I'm doing here? It's kind of good that I made this mistake. I know right away that I made a mistake because these two look exactly the same. See how they're exactly the same? When you weave, it should look like this. On one row, it went under that warp thread. Right here, see what I'm doing here? It went under it. But on the return, it goes over. That's how it stays a weaving. But what I did here, somewhere along the way, I made a mistake. But I'm seeing here, I really didn't make any mistakes on this row. My mistake happened on the row before it. I can see now. Can you see what I did? I went under 2 threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it out. An easy way. This is very easy to do because I've hardly woven anything. So I'm just going to pull it out here. So we'll start over. Oops. And so we'll start over. And I went over, so I went under. And now I went under, so I'm going to go over on the return. Again, I'm being careful I don't pull too tight. Just punch down just a couple of rows, and I see that they're kind of keeping nice and even on the side. You'll find when you're weaving that the thicker yarns, they might stick out a little bit, and that's okay. That's the way it should be because they're thicker yarns. And if you're all worried about it, then don't use thick and thin yarns. Make them all the same. That is what you're aiming for. Oops, sorry, little toothpick. Try to check every once in a while that your warps are staying on the lines up there. And if you really want to, you can snip those little tiny little. And if you'd like to, you can even snip these into little tiny notches at the top and the bottom to hold your threads in place. Now, as you can see, I can even pack it down pretty hard, but it's not really going to cover up these warp threads. That's because this is so thick. That's okay. They can show through. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop weaving with my pink, and I'm going to snip the pink off. And I'm going to snip the pink off. I need sharper scissors, but they are just so cute. Now, what I'm going to do is take the green thread, thread my needle again, and weave up through those loops right here. So weave up through them. I guess you're not exactly weaving. Sew it through them. And pack these down again. What I'm going to do is just start weaving again with this green thread. You can even turn your loom upside down if you want to. It doesn't matter. So I can see now that it went over, so I'm going to have to go under and over. I'd just like to tell you that the best thing to do is just experiment and have fun. One of my favorite things to do is weave two threads together. I'm not showing you that on this project because it can be a little tricky with the tensions of the threads. So we'll just stick to one thread at a time. If you'd like to learn more from me about weaving on the tiny loom, subscribe to my YouTube, because I'm planning to just keep this up with all kinds of fun ideas that you can do on your tiny loom. Oops, came out. Some people like to tie it in a knot so it won't come out. That's fine too. They just go like, some people like to tie it in a knot so it won't come out. And if you like to do that, just tie it in a knot after the needle. You can do that too. I don't usually myself like to do that because that knot could get caught as you're trying to weave in and out. But if you find it's frustrating and your needle keeps pulling through, especially for younger weavers, tying it in a knot is just fine. Now, I don't know about you, but I just love green and pink. And since I'm just having fun, I'm going to weave away here till I run out of the green. Then I'll decide what to do next. Don't tell anybody, but I have no plan about what's going on with this weaving. I'm just going to have fun. I pulled that one a little tight, so I'm going to get my needle and just pull it back over here just a tiny bit. Now there's just a few inches left here, so I'm going to let it hang down here too. And start my next color. So I'm going to cut the very edge, the very tip off of the yarn and put it through the needle. And we're getting so many thread ends going on the edge here. I'm just going to start over here this time. Later on, when we're finished, we're going to take these ends and we're just going to sew them down into the edges. So I don't like to have too many on a certain side. I also do think that yellow and green are luscious, and yellow and pink. I just love them all. They look so happy. I think any combination of the colors that I give you in your little yarn palette that you get in the kit, any way you put them together will look nice. There should be enough yarn in that kit to make a few of these little weavings. Oops, I've made a mistake again. Now, one of the lectures I give to my kids when I'm teaching them to weave, or any kind of art, a good artist isn't a good artist because they don't make any mistakes. Far from that. It's what they do with the mistakes. Now, as far as weavers go, if you make a mistake, the best thing is to just take it back out. And I see here where the mistake was made, and I want to show you that. I went under 2 right here. Maybe you noticed that while I was weaving. So I'm just going to take it out. You get very good at taking out. Like I say, I think sometimes I take out almost as much as I weave in. But we don't want to weave in the memory of a mistake. I'm also seeing here that I think that loop's just a little bit too big. So I'm going to pull it in a little bit. You don't have to be quite so fussy about it on your first one. The most important thing is it's better for the loops to be too big than you're pulling the selve edges in, and you're going to end up with one that's fat on the bottom, or excuse me, wide on the bottom and skinnier at the top. Now this one has come in just a little too much. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is pull it out to be a little bit of a bigger loop. And you'll notice while I do that, I'm going to hold down the thread right here with my finger. See how I'm doing that? That's because if I pull this, it's going to pull this thread too, which I think it's already done a little bit. See how much is pulled over here? These are the little things that are going to happen to you. So if they do and you find out when it's just too late, you just don't want to fix it, just chalk it up to this is my first project, okay? Don't be fretting over everything being too perfect because we are having fun. Now, what I did over here is I loosened it up again. Okay, it looks okay over here, I think. So I loosened it up here, and so I'm going to hold it down here and just kind of pull it through. Pull it through here a little bit. And if this doll just looks too difficult, just take the whole thing out and start over. Not that big a deal. So right here, it's a nice big loop now. And so now I'm going to gently tug on it and pack it down.